Hello and welcome to U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, Grantee Fundamentals. I'm Chelsea Mandel with Public Impact Partners. We created this series for the Planning Council and for their Virginia communities, but the series is available to anyone who's interested in tuning in. The series is for new and prospective HUD grantees, so whether you're managing a grant for the first time, you're taking over an existing project, or you're just trying to make sense of HUD funding. We break HUD topics into manageable sessions so you can build knowledge, but you can do it at a pace that works with your schedule. Our goal is that by understanding these HUD fundamentals, you can navigate federal grants more smoothly and you have more energy to give back to your mission, not just grant management. Today's session is an introduction to HUD and its Homelessness Assistance Programs. We'll specifically focus on the Continuum of Care, or COC program, and the Emergency Solutions Grants, or ESG program. We will start with the basics today. What is HUD? We'll look at HUD's role in addressing homelessness, HUD's Homelessness Assistance Programs, again focusing on COC and ESG. We'll look at the key roles involved in administering these grants. And we'll end with a brief discussion about communication and engagement, because if you are interested in administering HUD grants, there are expectations about communication and coordination with HUD and with the COC. Let's start with HUD. What exactly is it? Well, it is a federal agency and it's been around since 1965. Its main focus is housing and community development. They're really focused on making sure communities are strong and that community members have access to quality and affordable homes. HUD does this in a few different ways, like supporting home ownership, expanding affordable rental housing, and helping communities prevent and end homelessness. HUD is also responsible for promoting fair housing and making sure discrimination doesn't get in the way of folks' ability to have a safe and stable place to live. HUD carries out this work through different offices that you might interact with directly. For example, there's the Office of Public and Indian Housing, which runs programs like housing choice vouchers. There's the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, which is supposed to enforce fair housing laws and investigates housing discrimination. The Office of Community Planning and Development, or the CPD office, manages the homelessness grants we'll be talking about today and some other programs. And that's just a snapshot. There are several other offices as well that you might interact with in your life or in your career. HUD plays a huge role in tackling homelessness nationally and also in your community. They run programs that are funded through Congress, giving communities resources to prevent and to end homelessness. They also set rules by implementing regulations, they distribute funding, and they oversee programs to make sure everything is running as Congress intended. HUD also makes sure that grantees follow federal requirements like serving eligible households. They provide technical assistance as well, which is basically another word for training, tools, and guidance to help local providers deliver services. And they collect, they monitor, and they report homelessness data, which gives Congress and communities information about homelessness. The bottom line is that HUD is not just a funder. They can really shape how communities are engaging in homelessness response activities. So let's take a closer look at HUD's Homelessness Assistance Programs. At the core are these two major programs. There's the COC program and the ESG program. We'll talk about these in the next few slides. HUD also runs other programs to address homelessness. There's the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, or HOPWA program, which provides housing support for folks who are living with HIV or AIDS. There's the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, or YHDP, which focuses on youth homelessness and builds on the COC program framework. There's HUD VASH, which is the Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing Program, which pairs housing assistance with the VA to specifically support veterans. And there are several other programs that complement this work. It's also worth noting that HUD funds a lot of housing and community development programs that aren't technically labeled as homelessness assistance programs, but they still matter, right? There is so much research about homelessness being a direct result of housing market conditions. And so, any program that is expanding affordable housing or supporting home ownership or improving community development all play a role in addressing and reducing homelessness, even if they aren't labeled as homelessness assistance programs. So, let's take a closer look at COC specifically. The regulations for the COC program are in 24 CFR Part 578. CFR stands for the Code of Federal Regulations, or if you access these online, you would see eCFR, which is the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations. Regulations can sound very dense and they can seem dense once you open them, but they can actually be extremely helpful for grantees. So if you are interested in COC grants, I strongly encourage you to Google eCFR Part 578, go to that eCFR webpage, and look at the regulations to get more familiar with the program. The COC program is mostly about community-wide coordination, system building, and permanent housing solutions. It provides grants for permanent housing, which includes both rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing, or PSH, for transitional housing, for supportive services only, which can also sometimes include street outreach activities and coordinated entry system activities. And it also provides grants for community-wide functions like the Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS, which is all about data, and COC planning funds. The COC program regulations also define the responsibilities of continuums of care, or COCs. A COC is a group of organizations that are working together to coordinate homelessness services in a specific geographic region. Any organization who's involved in homelessness work can become a member of the COC. So COCs include both grantees who receive COC grants, but also a ton of other organizations who don't receive COC grants, but they want to play a role in this collaborative group effort of coordinating resources across their entire community. So when you are out in the community, you'll likely hear the term COC being used in multiple ways. Sometimes it is referring to the COC program that provides funding through grants for housing, services, and system-wide activities. Other times it is referring to the COC as a region or group or coalition, which again is that group that's coordinating homelessness efforts in that area. The visual here shows that every community in the US is part of a COC and also part of a broader HUD region. If you were to zoom in on one state, you'd see that the state has boundaries that divide it into one or more COCs. For example, Virginia has boundaries creating 16 different COCs, and each of those COCs covers a specific area and has a specific name. Every one of those COCs has what's called a lead agency. They're also known as a collaborative applicant. The lead agency is responsible for applying for COC grants for the COC, like the COC's planning funds. They run the local funding process for other organizations to apply for federal COC grants, and they lead numerous other COC activities beyond grants. Okay, so we've briefly talked about COC. Now let's briefly dig into ESG. The ESG regulations are at 24 CFR Part 576, and just like the COC regulations, they're electronically available if you wish to dig into them. Unlike COC, which is focused more on system building, ESG is all about crisis response and immediate housing stability. So it provides grants for emergency shelter, street outreach, rapid rehousing, homelessness prevention, and HMIS. ESG doesn't set the same system-wide standards like the COC program does, but it does require grantees to coordinate with local COCs. For example, if a state or a local government receives ESG funding, they have to consult with the COC on how they're allocating those funds. Another example is that all ESG funded grantees are required to use the COC's HMIS for data entry. So even though ESG and COC are different programs and different grants, the coordination between ESG and COC is very real. It shapes daily workflow, and it even shapes how people access services. The infographic here shows us how COC and ESG work together in a homelessness response system. You can think of it like COC focusing mostly on system level work and permanent housing, whereas ESG is focusing more on crisis response, and together they create this broader continuum of resources. There's street outreach, which ESG funds. COC can sometimes fund it as well. These programs are connecting with folks who are unsheltered or disconnected from traditional services. There is emergency shelter, which is funded by ESG, which provides immediate safety and support. There's transitional housing, which is funded by COC and provides a temporary place to stay with targeted services. There's homelessness prevention, funded by ESG, which helps folks stay in their homes. There's rapid rehousing, funded by both ESG and COC, which provides short-term housing assistance. And then there's permanent supportive housing, or PSH, which is funded by COC, and that provides long-term housing assistance and ongoing support. All of these programs work best when they're built on strong community-wide systems, like planning and coordination, an effective coordinated entry system, and quality data through HMIS. COC primarily funds these system-level components, but ESG plays a role as well. Ultimately, ESG and COC are different programs, but they still work together to prevent and end homelessness in any community. So we've covered the ESG and COC programs briefly. Let's look at how the program funding or grants actually gets to communities or to grantees. At the top of this infographic, Congress appropriates funds for homelessness assistance grants. HUD then runs the programs, oversees funding competition, and administers grants to communities. For ESG, grants are awarded on a formula basis. This is a literal formula that considers things like population size. Funds flow from HUD to non-entitlement areas, that means states, and to entitlement areas, which means metropolitan cities and urban counties. Those entities will often run their own application processes to sub-award that funding out to other local governments and nonprofits who are operating programs on the ground. For COC, it works differently. COC grants are not formula-based, they are competitive grants. So HUD will set the competition rules, and local COCs will run the competition in their local communities. After that competition process, HUD will grant money to the applicants who applied and were awarded, like governments, nonprofits, and other organizations. To make these grants work, it can help to know who the key players are in HUD grant administration. First, the HUD field office. I like to think of this as a local HUD satellite office. These offices provide oversight, approvals, and ongoing communication. For most COC and ESG grantees, your main contact is a CPD rep. That's the representative from the Community Planning and Development Office, and they help you with all things grant related. The Continuum of Care, or COC, again, that's the regional group that coordinates the community's homelessness response system. They handle planning, they set local standards, they manage the coordinated entry system in HMIS, they run the local COC competition, they monitor performance, they do much, much more than that. There's also the recipient or the grantee. This is the organization that receives grants directly from HUD. They are accountable for program and financial compliance, and they oversee how their funds are used. And then finally, the subrecipient. That's an organization that receives funding from a recipient to run programs in accordance with the plan and the policies that are set by the recipient. So this visual is a basic flow of HUD grants. HUD makes awards to recipients, and then sometimes recipients will make awards to one or to more subrecipients. So to wrap up this brief introduction, let's briefly talk about communication and engagement because HUD expects it and it is key to running effective grant programs. If you are or if you will become a HUD grantee, you are expected to be in regular contact with your field office, like emailing or meeting with your CPD rep about your grants. Beyond HUD, all grant recipients and subrecipients need to be plugged in to the local COC. For example, they'll be using HMIS and participating in the COC's coordinated entry system. They'll be showing up to COC meetings, joining work groups and committees, and championing COC-wide efforts like supporting shared goals, helping with data cleanup, or elevating the great work you're all doing to other local leaders and to other funders. This kind of ongoing engagement keeps the system running more smoothly, and it helps make sure your grants have the biggest impact they can. With that, thank you for tuning in to this brief introduction to HUD, and thank you for the leadership and the care you all bring to this work.